Hey everyone, welcome back to Frizzle and Friends Corner. I hope you are having an awesome day. I thought I would share something with you today that my family did last week. That was we walked the walk for diabetes through JDRF, which is the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. We walk it every year. This year, unfortunately, it was different than most years because, again, you can't be with groups of people. But our family wanted to still do it, so we walked the 3 miles around our neighborhood. We like to support JDRF every year on the walks for a couple reasons, mainly because one of our kids is a diabetic, as am I, as are millions of other people in the world. So today, I thought we would read My Pancreas Needs Glasses. I don't know if you're familiar with what diabetes is, but it's when a part of your body doesn't work right. Just like if you wore glasses, that's because your eyes don't work right. So our pancreases don't work right. So Frizzle, I'm going to put you over there. And it's kind of a long book, so we may just read part of it now and then maybe read the other part tomorrow, but we'll see as we go along. I am not going to read the introduction, though, only because, well, the introduction is just kind of my view of it, why I wrote it, why it's important to me. But again, it's kind of long, but we will read the prologue. And the prologue is just kind of the very beginning of the book. Just kind of introduces you to kind of what's going on, maybe kind of sets the scene of the book. So, and My Pancreas, like the Frizzle books, is dedicated to families and the love that holds us all together. This book is inspired by our children, the incredible love that we have for them, and our constant desire to protect them. And here is the prologue. Hi, I'm Zach, and this is my little brother Julian. One day, it occurred to me that everyone has a story. Let me explain. Julian is a type 1 diabetic. He has been since he was 21 months old, and he does really well with it. In fact, I have to admit, although he is younger than me, he is much braver than me. He checks his sugar, he takes shots. I scream when I see a needle coming anywhere close to me. Anyhow, he does all of this and he barely complains about it. I have to say barely because after all, he is my little brother and I have to give him a hard time about something. I've often wondered how he really feels about having diabetes though. I mean, I know he has to take shots and stuff, but he does get candy even in the middle of the night if his sugar goes low. I don't get candy in the middle of the night, ever. But still, I've wondered if he really ever paid attention to all the other people in the world that have parts of their bodies that don't work right, just like how his pancreas doesn't work right. Did he ever stop to think about that? It was time for me to find out exactly what was going on in the little squirt's head. It was a hot August afternoon when I asked Julian if he wanted to take a walk. He argued with me, of course, saying that he wanted to play football or ride bikes or skateboard, but he eventually agreed and we began our walk. As we started out, we ran into our friend Robbie. I said to Robbie, I've never asked you this before, but why do you wear that thing that hooks around your ear? Robbie said, because I can't hear out of my one ear. And actually, I can only hear like 50% out of my other ear. If I wear this hearing aid, then I can hear everything that people are saying to me. Julian looked at Robbie and said, cool. We asked Robbie if he wanted to walk with us, but he said that he had chores to do and he would catch up with us in about an hour. We could get a big football game going. We agreed and continued our walk. We soon saw Mr. and Mrs. Fulton walking their dog. We asked why they seemed to be in such a hurry. Mr. Fulton said that he was running late for a doctor appointment, and Mrs. Fulton wasn't very happy with him. Then he smiled and winked at us. Julian said, "Are you not feeling well?" Mr. Fulton said, "Oh, no, Julian, I'm feeling fine. I just have to visit Dr. Hilton, my heart doctor, for a checkup. My heart doesn't always work exactly right, so I have something called a pacemaker that helps it keep its rhythm." Julian said, "Your heart sings?" Mr. Fulton replied, "No, silly. The rhythm of your heart is the way your heart beats." Julian said, "Cool," and we continued on. We saw so many people out and about that day. Miss Dot and Mr. Steve were outside washing Miss Dot's new car. She loves sports cars. We waved to each other, and Miss Dot called out to us, "Be careful, boys. I know your parents don't allow you to go too far." "We promise we won't go too far," I said. She always tells us to be careful no matter what we're doing. I think she really likes us. It seems like she's always worrying about us. Then we passed Mr. Bob and Miss Marilyn. They were out taking their daily walk. As they walked by, Miss Marilyn yelled back, "Nice to see you boys walking." Mr. Bob added, "It keeps you healthy." We see them out walking every day. Our neighbor lady always says that Mr. Bob is buff. Then, it never fails, her husband always starts his exercise program again. I guess so he can look as good as Mr. Bob. As we continued walking, we saw Mrs. Brogdon and Mrs. Buchanan driving towards us. They stopped the car to say hello, and I asked, "What are you doing here?" Neither one of them lives in our neighborhood, so we figured they had come to visit someone. "We're dropping Terry's medicine off for her," Mrs. Brogdon said. Julian asked, "Why does Terry need medicine? Is she sick?" Mrs. Brogdon said, "Well, you know she has a part of her body that doesn't work. One of the glands in her neck, her thyroid gland, doesn't work the way it's supposed to. The hormone that our thyroid makes helps us grow and gives us energy, as well as many other things. If the thyroid doesn't work right, we need medicine to help it." I said, "I have glands in my cheeks that don't really work right." "Yeah, every once in a while his cheeks get all swollen and he looks like he kind of has basketballs in them," added Julian. "Right," said Mrs. Brogdon. "But fortunately for you, Zach, your problem is something that you will outgrow, and it's nothing serious." Julian then asked Mrs. Brogdon if she had any kids in her class this year with food allergies. He had had her for kindergarten last year, and there were 2 kids with really bad food allergies in the class. The one little boy, Ross, was allergic to almost everything. He always had to carry a special pen with him. It was called a pen, but it was actually a shot that he would have to get if he came in contact with any of those foods. Mrs. Brogdon said that this year she just had one little girl with a peanut allergy. Because of that, though, Mrs. Brogdon made a rule that there would be no peanut butter or nuts of any kind in her class. Julian loved Mrs. Brogdon. She always made sure that the kids with medical issues were never made to feel different from the other kids in the class. He saw that she was doing the very same thing for this little girl. Mrs. Buchanan, Julian's first grade teacher, is the same way. She treats Julian just like everyone else and never makes him feel different. Julian said, "Gotta go now," and we both said, "See you later." Miss Shirley and Mr. Chuck were in their front yard planting flowers and hanging a wind chime. They waved and said, "Hey, it's our 2 favorite boys. How are you 2 doing?" We laughed and said, "Fine, thank you." It seems that every kid they see is their favorite. Oh well, we like to think that we really are. We started thinking that maybe we'd better head home. We knew that Robbie was planning a big football game and we didn't want to miss it. Just then, we saw an amazing sight. We saw a man running, literally running, with one real human leg and one that looked robotic. It looked like it was made of metal or something. I didn't want to be rude, but I was so curious, I had to ask him about it. I said, "Excuse me, sir?" He stopped and said, "Yes." "What happened to your leg?" I asked. He looked down at his normal-looking leg and pointed to a little red bite and said, "Oh, I don't know. Must have gotten bit by a mosquito or something." We just looked at him, and he started laughing. "Oh, you mean this leg?" And he pointed to his robotic-looking leg. "Yes," I said. He then introduced himself to us and told us that his name was Jesse, and he had been injured in the war. He said after he lost his leg, the doctors told him that they could give him a new kind of leg that would not be exactly the same as the one he used to have, but it would work so he could do so many of the things that he had previously enjoyed doing. "So," he said, "that's my story." He seemed like a really neat guy. We told him that we had a tremendous amount of respect for him. He looked at us and said, "Thank you. You guys seem pretty cool yourselves." Julian looked at him and said, "No, you are the cool one." We both saluted him. He saluted us back, smiled, and continued on. Julian and I walked towards home in silence. I think we were both completely in awe of the soldier we had just met. Finally, I looked at Julian and said, "Think he ever feels sorry for himself?" Julian said, "No. I think he is probably just happy that the doctors could help him so that he can still walk and run." I said, "Yeah, I bet you're right." Just then, from his front porch, Mr. Carl yelled to us, "Hey, boys, you're not getting yourselves into any trouble today, are you?" We laughed and walked over to him and his wife, Miss Peg. We told him that we hadn't gotten into any trouble yet, but that it was still pretty early. He laughed and asked us to sit down and talk to him for a couple minutes. We knew that we didn't have long or we would miss the game, but Mr. Carl and Miss Peg were both so nice that you just couldn't say no to either one of them. Plus, Miss Peg always gives us some of her homemade buns that we love so much. As we sat and talked, Mr. Carl and I both noticed that Julian seemed quiet. Mr. Carl asked, "What's on your mind, kiddo? Usually we can't get you to stop talking. Why are you so quiet today?" Julian sat there deep in thought and finally said, I guess I never realized until today how many people you meet just on an ordinary day with a part of their body that doesn't work right." Mr. Carl suggested that Julian crawl up on his lap by patting his hands on his thighs. Julian climbed up and Mr. Carl said, "You know, you are exactly right. Look at me. I've had diabetes, just like you, for years. I've got a hip that isn't the same one I was born with. You know what I mean by that?" Julian shook his head no. "It means that my hip didn't work right, so the doctors had to give me a new one. My gallbladder, which is a thing down in my tummy, didn't work right, so they took it out. In fact, I'm not really sure why we even have one of those if they can just take it out, but I guess that's why I'm not the doctor. Anyhow, my point is that there are many, many people who have things wrong with them or parts of their bodies that don't work. And it really doesn't matter who you are. You can be a boy or a girl. You can be young or old. You can be black or white or yellow or green. We all either have some kind of health issue or chances are we're going to get one. And that's just the way life is." What I'd like you to do, Julian, since you have a part of your body that doesn't work like it should, is always try to take good care of yourself and stay as healthy as you can. Also, one of the most important things is to keep a good attitude. Think good thoughts, learn to be thankful, appreciate who you are and all the good things that you have. Oh, and never stop smiling and laughing. That always makes you feel better. In fact, I don't even tell people that I have diabetes. I just tell them that my old pancreas needs glasses. Julian and I both started laughing, and I told Mr. Carl what a nice time we had sitting and talking with him. I also told him that I thought it was really nice that he informed us about all his body parts that didn't work. He cracked up at that comment. Mr. Carl is such a neat guy. I couldn't believe how late it was getting. We were just rounding the corner that would take us to our house, as well as to the park where the football game had probably already started, when we saw Mr. Bill and his wife, Miss Mary. Mr. Bill said, "You two better hurry and get home because your mother is looking for you." Mr. Bill and Miss Mary run the church that we go to. Miss Mary's always baking, and Mr. Bill is always making us laugh. We thanked them and started running. As we passed the park, Declan and Jared and all the neighborhood kids started yelling out for us to hurry. They had been waiting for us to start the game. Mikey said that Nick had just run home to get his inhaler, but that he would be right back. Nick has asthma. We told them that as soon as we ran inside for Julian to check his sugar and let our parents know that we were back from our walk, we'd be right out. That night, as Mom and Dad were tucking Sage, Julian, and me into bed, and we were talking about the day, Dad asked us the question he often asks. So, what did you boys learn today? Sage fell asleep before he could even answer, and Julian and I got quiet for a minute. I think we were both reflecting on our walk. I looked at Mom and Dad and said, I learned that everybody really does have a story. Julian looked at Mom and Dad and said, I learned that my old pancreas needs glasses. So that is the end of the actual book, which I hope you enjoyed. And now we've got the epilogue, which, like we talked about the prologue at the beginning, that just kind of leads you into the story. So the epilogue now kind of just ties it all up. It's just the ending statement, basically. So here's the epilogue. I had no idea when we set out for our walk that day that we would run into so many people that had a part of their bodies that didn't work right, or as I like to say, had a story. What ended up being so neat about how everything fell into place was that I never even had to ask Julian how he felt about having diabetes. I got my answer by the look in his eyes with each and every person that we talked to that afternoon, when he told me that he didn't think the soldier that we met felt sorry for himself, by the smile on his face as he sat on Mr. Carl's lap, and most of all, when he told our parents that he had learned that day that his old pancreas needed glasses. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the book. I'm sorry, I know it got a little noisy. I love to sit outside and read and work, and there's always noise out here with planes going over by or people working. So anyhow, I also hope that maybe this book just makes you stop to think a little bit. If you happen to have diabetes or any medical condition, or if you know of anybody that does, maybe a friend or someone in your class, just always stop to think that maybe they feel a little different, and it would be a nice idea to just be kind and just always reassure them that they are absolutely no different than anybody else. All right, guys, take care, and I will see you real soon.